This is The Audience Connection, the podcast where we go beyond what connects and into why it actually sticks.
Episodes are grounded in both research and real-world experience, unpacking what's behind audience behavior, from psychology and neuroscience to cultural cues and decision-making.
And then we ground all those principles into real-world applications, so you understand exactly how to create stories that are memorable and change behavior.
We talk to brand storytellers, behavior scientists, and communication leaders about the real drivers of attention, trust, and action.
Sponsored by Casual, where behavioral science meets storytelling to build trust for your audiences.
We're your hosts, Ollie Atkinson and Lydia Chan.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Audience Connection. So, Lydia, you sat down with Michael Sternoff, Global Creative Director at Amazon LEO, which is Amazon's low Earth orbit satellite network. And what an interesting background Michael has. I mean, it ranges from Emmy award-winning filmmaking through to video game trailers.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about the various different jobs creatives and filmmakers have taken on in their past lives. As I don't know, I think it's that diversity of experiences that really infuse, into our work and makes it uniquely ours, right? So I loved how all those chapters in Michael's career really shaped his approach to storytelling.
Yeah, and Michael talks about learning early that everyone has a story and you can find one anywhere. And you can hear that in the way he makes incredibly technical things at Amazon LEO feel genuinely human and authentic. And what I think's great about this episode is you guys dive into a very specific project, which is the new brand launch film for Amazon LEO. And I love it when we do that on the podcast. And for those who are listening, we have a link to the film in the show notes. So do have a watch, because we talk a lot about the left and right brain side of things on this show. And this project is definitely right brain focused.
For sure. It's a cool film that really captures the mission of Amazon LEO, but also it authentically represents the people that Amazon LEO impacts. And Michael breaks down the process for us and how they approach this project and maintain that authenticity while producing something quite cinematic.
Yeah, and also there's tons of great creative philosophy in this one. I love it when Michael says brand storytelling is all feels, and you can always measure it, but you can absolutely sense when it's working. Okay, all right, that's enough from us. Let's dive in. Here's Lydia with Michael Sternoff.
Michael, welcome to the show. I am really looking forward to our conversation today because your background is just so rich in visual storytelling, right? You're an Emmy award-winning filmmaker. You've had many Emmy nominations as a director of photography and also directed video game trailers. So now you find yourself telling stories at one of the largest tech companies in the world. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to being the global creative director at Amazon LEO, which is formerly Amazon Kuiper.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about, how you get to a point in your life, and I was going through some old boxes, like from like sixth grade, and I actually had way back then we had like a journalism radio show, like it was like a live to tape in my sixth grade class, and then by high school I got more and more, and I worked on the school newspaper, and that took me to the University of Montana, where I was very much focused on like video production, kind of news storytelling. And with some of my professors there, it was really, you got a big state like Montana, and a thing that we learned is that there was a story kind of on every back road. And so there was a few shows that we worked on, like Montana Backroads and Made in Montana. But the core of it was that like everybody had a story, and you could kind of find a story everywhere. And so that took me to Chicago, where I started working in news, and I worked in essentially the next almost 10 years in news at NBC, ABC, part of Tribune as well. And in that time, I would spend a lot of time kind of going into like people's houses, kind of stepping in their lives, figuring out ways to kind of, honestly tell their story. And at that time, you also just become very, very efficient at telling stories, setting up the camera, getting your shots, that kind of stuff. And that took me to creating some documentaries. One was Under the Ice, is about sturgeon spearing in Lake Winnebago, Wisconsin. And then another about a friend who was diagnosed with cancer at a very young age, and kind of the story through her blog and her eyes. And with those documentaries, you learn a lot. You learn that documentary is all about passion and storytelling. The business, there's those heavy hitters. There's like a Steve James, there's Ken Burns, but they're the exception, not the rule. And so if you want to work in documentaries, you just got to love it, which you do. But I was kind of at that point searching for something where, how can I take, the storytelling skills I love and then some other things I love. And right around that time, I was back in Seattle, and a friend worked in video games. And he was more on the engineering side, but he's like, hey, they do these making of documentaries. And so once we started doing that, it was very traditional. It's talking to somebody about a passion they love, learning more about it, and asking all the questions. And so we did these BTS documentaries. I started at first at a company, Bungie, that made the video game Destiny, and then eventually to Halo for Microsoft. And I think one thing I learned, especially kind of Studs Terkel really knew it, that like the idea of working, like if you ask somebody about their job, they're always passionate about like their craft and what they want to create, right? And a lot of times it's just kind of show me what you're doing, and it always works well for camera. And with gaming, it's a little bit different because you need to consider that a lot of their craft is in the computer screen, and so you got to figure out ways to capture that. So it's everything from screen recordings to going in the actual game engine, flying around, and everything in between. So yeah, I at that point doing these kind of gaming documentaries, I also got into gaming trailers, and there's a realization that if you're working with the proprietary engines at those companies or in like the Unreal Engine, you're selecting lenses, you're using cameras, all that stuff, and you're telling these kind of cinematic stories, but it's just in a virtual world. One of my favorite ones that I did was for a VR game called Moss, who has this kind of little kind of mouse character Quill. That's also it's kind of a Lord of the Rings Redwall style story where it's like this hero mouse fighting up against other animals in the animal kingdom, but it's really cute. And you could really take the camera and personify the hero Quill, but also tell this action story, in a 2 to 3 minute trailer. And then also it's just really fun. When you're actually doing capture sessions, it's in a way kind of like being on set. You have, maybe the art director managing the character. You're setting up kind of a virtual camera. At that time, we mounted a Quest controller onto like a camera stabilizer, and we're like flying around virtually, but like in the real world. So I think that through all of that, it was kind of finding new areas to tell stories, and then also finding new technology to tell stories. And so in 2019, I had an opportunity to come over to Amazon. I started at AWS, and then I was at Amazon Photos. And that's where I got more into the kind of commercial story campaigns, the 90-second things. And that brought me now to the last 3 years. I was on formerly Project Kuiper, but we launched the brand Leo. So it's Amazon Leo. And it's all kind of these kind of random skills that you kind of built up from documentary storytelling to kind of learning the Unreal Engine, and then just having that consistent feeling and story throughout is kind of what I've brought to where I'm currently at. And so where we're currently at is we're doing everything from overseeing like, a 90-second kind of brand film to doing like those short documentaries that are really kind of discovering why people need connectivity, how it can help them, and it kind of cross all these touch points. And then I think the key for anybody working in brand is having that consistent storytelling feeling. So no matter what touch point you're at, you're kind of telling the same story, you feel like the same personality, but you're shifting a little bit based on the technology. So yeah, right now I'm the global brand creative director for Amazon Leo, and we'd recently launched, and so it's everything from overseeing the brand guidelines on the website to doing commercials and those documentaries.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, Michael. And what I love about your background, your journey rather, is it really showcases, I guess, what like just such problem solvers that we are in a way, right? I,
Yeah.
I think, there's obviously like a framework to the way that stories can be told and like how effective stories are told. But, you come across these challenges, such as, being in a gaming world and not necessarily in, say, in real life, and trying to figure out, okay, how do we still like instill this framework into the story, but have all these like non-traditional perhaps ways of approaching the elements that make the story come to life. So I think that's yeah, that's really cool, and it really just makes us critical thinkers when it comes to how do we put this together. So when I first came across your work, I actually was unaware that Amazon even had a satellite business, right? And I'm sure just not surprising to our audience as well, because Amazon has a foot in almost everything. Um, I Can you give us just like a brief background on what is Amazon Leo, and what's the mission?
Yeah, so the mission is to kind of connect the world, for everybody from the unserved and underserved to large businesses, governments. And how we do it is really cool technology. It's a phased array antenna, which is like a solid state antenna, and it's electronically steered, and it connects to a constellation of satellites in low Earth orbit. So a little bit of why we named it Leo is it's a nod to that technology. If you imagine traditional satellites in geostationary, if like, or in MEO, if you think about direct TV and things like that, they're much, much further away from Earth. These
Yeah.
satellites are closer, like the International Space Station and the flyover head, and about 17,000 miles an hour. So the thing that's really, really cool is that latency is, if you want to game, if you want to have like real-time reactions, it's all about the latency and that internet connection. But it doesn't limit you if you're close to a fiber line or close to a major city. Like you can connect virtually like across the world. But it's this very, very fast, high throughput connection. And it's just, so if you imagine you could connect anywhere, or almost anywhere, from, a island in the Pacific, or in the central Montana, or in Virginia, you could connect with Amazon Leo.
Yeah. And I think what's such a challenge with your role is really how do we make all that like technical stuff, right, feel human.
Yeah.
And on this show, it's really we're all about understanding the audience, right? Because that's who we're speaking to. That's who we're trying to connect with. So I guess when you think about the content that you guys create at Amazon Leo, what different types of audiences does it serve? And if you can, I guess, just give a little bit of an overview about who they are, and what the different storytelling approaches you take for those different types of audience groups.
I think that you start with the Amazon brand and like what people know about Amazon, because that's kind of the first thing people think about when they think about Amazon Leo. And no matter what our audience is, we want them to know, like, generally the things that are great about Amazon. You could trust about this. You could trust that AWS is the infrastructure that powers everything from Netflix to everything we kind of love, computer systems. And then there's that trust with like Prime and quick delivery and that kind of stuff. And so that second layer is who is our customer within that, like generally that awareness that people know what Amazon is. And with our government, governments are already using the AWS for a lot of their infrastructure, and it's just reliable. It's a steady hand, but it's more of a buttoned up. I always kind of say that, like, when we're talking, we're often like a person where we can put a hoodie on, we could be casual, and we could hang out with our friends, but then we could also kind of be more formal and wear a suit. And as we're talking with those different audiences, we'll adjust slightly, but at the core, we're still the same kind of person, that same kind of brand. So the government, on that side, it's, it's that trust that we're AWS and that kind of stuff. With our B2B audience, it's very similar to our Amazon Business or AWS customers, where they know who we are, they know that we're reliable, and that AWS has just been such a linchpin to a lot of companies scaling for the internet. And then for our Amazon consumer stuff, people trust Amazon to deliver their packages. We hope that they can trust us to kind of deliver this new form of internet service. And then you kind of go to the technology. Most people think of internet, and they don't want to think of internet, right? Like, it's like, I don't want to think about it. Is it coming from a 5G tower? Is it coming from my Wi-Fi? They just want the connectivity. And so there's
you only think
a lot
about
of
it when it's going wrong.
exactly. And everybody wants that clean, clear connection. We did a doc in Virginia, and one of the moms was telling me that, like, her kids in a poor connected area, like, they'll argue over who's using the most bandwidth, right? But kids don't know, like, if they're using like any app, what's dragging more, what's not. And the mom just wants clear connection for everybody. And so they don't want to think about it. But with some of the technology, we want to let them know, hey, this is how generally it works. If you want to look under the hood, here's kind of the storytelling that powers it. And so on our top level kind of consumer, and you'll see with our brand film, we want it to be very, very friendly. But if you take a step down and you want to know about the constellation, how things get connected, we can kind of go to more of a blueprint form lower in our funnel. So we are always considering, like, on the upper funnel, we want to care about our audience. We want to understand our audience, understand their pain points, and then kind of tell a story that connects with them, whatever the medium. And then, if that person is looking at the specs, they really want to know, like, hey, is this going to work for me technically? How is this different than if I got a fiber line or something like that run to my house? And so the storytelling flexes wherever we're on the funnel and then what customer we're at. But at the core, we're always just Amazon. And I'd say at the very core, Amazon they say it's a customer-centric company, but I guess with my storytelling, like, throughout a number of years, it's understanding the audience and caring for the audience, because you meet so many different people. And at their core, they're often, they have the same wants and needs. And so the only way you could tell a story that resonates is by kind of, spending some time with them, understanding them first, and then figuring out what the story is.
No, for sure. And I think your latest project did just that, right? So let's talk about the brand, brand launch video. We know in a rebrand, it's never a small feat, right? And for a brand, film, there's always a lot of stakeholders, eyes on it, competing priorities, pressure to really, make a splash. So maybe, if you can start with, like, how was your team briefed in, right? And how you landed on the creative that you went with?
I'd say that it starts, it's especially a kind of a large company that could be like a large ship that you got to move. Planning is everything. And that's been the thing that I think I've been very, very happy that I've done throughout the years. And so this brand film, it was December. I still remember it because it was late December of 2023. I knew that I had some remaining budget, and then I always we had a lot of the pieces of the brand locked, and we want to tell, like, kind of a big, impactful story to tie those pieces together. And if I waited to, like, right before it launched, and I'm like, hey, let's get all the funds, let's get all of this, let's get the concept. at like right before launch, it just wouldn't happen, right? So asked, I took some of those funds. I worked with Droga 5, and there's an amazing CD over there named Trace. And I knew like I wanted to work with Trace again. I trusted him. I trusted, the reputation of Droga. And so I started some of the kind of development budget there where we kind of briefed him on like, this isn't the final brand, but this is kind of what we're working towards. These are the ideas. And once we got that kind of we started hammering out like the ideas. I think Trace in particular understands generally my tastes. It harkens back to kind of that documentary kind of slice of American life. The thing that I always reference, Terrence Malick's Tree of Life, just how it's shot is so gorgeous, and it's kind of this dreamy handheld, really really like um feels like old school kind of documentary home movie feel, but just very cinematic. And that was always kind of the look of the North Star. And so we started with development. We started pitching around some ideas. Me and my manager, who kind of leads brand strategy, Don, we kind of tested all of them, and it went from the very, very high fantastical to the really, really rooted and kind of simple problem solving of like, it's going to make your day just a little bit better. And what I really resonated when we kind of came across the idea of Countdown, if anybody watches the video, it's a series of vignettes. And in isolation, you don't know kind of how all of them are tied together. And then you realize that in each scene, there's a number that links to a launch of one of our satellites. And it was the idea of the cleverness. It was the that we could show a lot of different problems being solved. And that's kind of where we started. Through that, once we had our general concept, it came down to what problems are we solving, right? So it was working with everything from talking with our solutions architects for like talking with our business people, like, you know, who are the customers and what are the smartest innovations that our customers can see. And so, we had a first draft with a lot of very, very different scenarios. And then it came to like, what are our customer scenarios? And then the third thing that influenced that story was generally like, what can we do budget wise? Like, ideally, if we wanted to shoot maybe a remote broadcast of cliff diving, we didn't have we couldn't get out there, but could we do a race car broadcast instead or something like that? And so it was kind of those storytelling beats and like being super flexible as we can change. And you mentioned earlier kind of like how you get blocked, right? Like you're always blocked somewhere. But I always think of it like Frogger, but really the Seinfeld episode of Frogger when Costanza's trying to go across the street. It's like you're always going to get blocked. And the solution isn't like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not going to move forward. It's like you got to go left, right. But you just want to keep on moving forward. It's like the Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. And so it's like, if this scenario doesn't work, what scenarios can work? And so, yeah, that's where it was a lot of showing the idea, pressure testing the ideas early on, making sure that the storyboards and that all the way up, they were kind of bought into that storyboard and like the concept. And then once we greenlit it, if you're shooting, we don't want to go and erase the whiteboard and start again after it's in the can. And the biggest thing is just building trust with many people. So it doesn't not everybody's bought into the idea, that everybody's excited about the idea.
For sure.
It's a lot of conversations.
For sure. I think, with so many people involved, with a lot of, again, high level stakeholders involved, it's really about bringing them along the journey and also making them feel like they're a part of it, right? I think, there are behavior science principles around, sort of being part of the building of something where
Mhm.
you, no matter really what the final product is, you feel more kind of emotionally attached to it and more positive
Yeah.
towards it. And what I like about how this project started too, what you said really in the beginning of your answer is that you started early, right? A lot of times, I feel with some of the clients that we work with, is that the brand film or just any video component sometimes is sort of an afterthought, because there's so, of course there's so many other aspects of a project, of a launch, going on, right? And bringing in your creative partners, your video partners early, and having them think through exactly what our goals are, what we want the outcomes to be, is key, versus let's get together and like write this brief for them, right? It's almost like, hey, let's talk before this brief has been developed, and work on creating that together.
Yeah.
So I really like that. And it shows, right, in the final product that, hey, this really had a lot of thought, discovery, again, testing, research behind it. And it really created this kind of cohesive story, as the final product.
Yeah.
What I also want to touch on, I mean, one of the things that we like to talk about on the show is really the science of storytelling.
Mm.
And one of our guests was Orlando Wood, who was on an earlier episode, and he's System One's Chief Innovation Officer. So really one of the top authorities on advertising and creative effectiveness. And he talks a lot about like left brain, right brain techniques.
Mm.
And what I like about this film was it was heavily right brain leaning, right? And simply put, when content is more right brain leaning, it lodges more easily into our memories. And I can see the sort of various scenes, right, are very much rooted in real people, real like user stories, right? From the rural farm stand, accepting a digital payment, to an ambulance being able to connect with a doctor on a long stretch of wood, right? Road. um, it brings me back to making sure you have the right characters in your story and really portraying the right scenes at the right time. So I guess, how did you go about that in this piece, right? Being able to find stories that are, I'm sure, rooted in real kind of life scenarios or real user scenarios, but bringing it to life in again, like this kind of like storytelling way.
Yeah. What I started with is really understanding, the one thing that stands out is our business to business partners, right? And understanding those kind of use cases. And the fishing one is a really good example because you don't see it in the film, but really what it's based on is these buoys that are kind of like connected. And I was actually just talking with somebody how much of a nightmare electronics at sea are, and especially keeping them out there, because there's salt water, there's some casing, and it's this really cool brand new technology. Where if you had connectivity to that, it could, track water temperature, waterways. And so there's like, it's everything from weather prediction to fishery and knowing what areas to overfish. The cattle one is also a good example of that. And you don't see it, but the idea is that the farmer has a smart collar, and that they could track their cattle. And so if they're on an open range, that the cattle aren't overgrazing in a certain area. And all this is actually based on a few companies that have this technology out in the field. So it started with talking with our business partners, figuring out what could be visual, but actually like what innovations are out there. And then the next step, and it's a really good example with the fisherman, is that actor actually was a fisherman. And so we were, it was funny, I wasn't on set that day, but he was like, the director and the crew was talking to him, and it's like, hey, how would you set up your, like, your sweater and your overalls? And he's like, would you roll them up? And he's like, nah, and it was something like only Johnny the Hat would wear his overalls like that. And like, they're all joking, like it's an inside joke, but it's like clearly some fisherman, like inside knowledge. But, casting that person that really knows how to present, knows how those environments are operated is super critical. It is something that we've always pushed for authenticity within our spots. But we were also very much kind of pushed there when COVID hit, and I shot a spot for Amazon Photos, and we had a father and his two kids, then the real father and his two kids, and then later on we had a couple that were a real couple, and so it was just like we realized that once they're on set, they're more comfortable. And that couple example, they were both actors anyways, and getting people to kind of have that like insight for this is how it actually is,
Yeah.
makes things easier because you're not filling in the lines over there. You're filling in the technical lines and the storytelling you want to feel. And like, that just makes your job easier.
Yeah. No, I really love that, right? I think it's those little like subtleties that we put in the scenes where that particular audience or individual will catch on to, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, in the farmer scene, them wearing some specific technology, we wouldn't know what it is, but perhaps a farmer that's in need of Amazon Leo's services would recognize that, right? To sort of say like, hey, they know me, right? Like they understand that, hey, this is what I deal with and what I like utilize every day. Like this is really authentic content. So I really like that. You mentioned in our earlier conversation that brand is kind of all feels, right? And that you can't necessarily measure feels. And I think some of the most impactful films are sometimes seen by a small group of people, right? But when we are up against marketers and individuals who are measuring ROI of the work that we do, it can be challenging to make that argument. So I guess what's your philosophy around pushing, your creative intuition versus maybe putting too much on analytics?
It's especially with analytics, and I think this has been true since. I mean, it was true with the Nielsen ratings. It was especially true with YouTube. It's every kind of wave of new technology. When YouTube came in, everybody was trying to optimize their storytelling for kind of like, it's like, oh, you got to be like 45 seconds. And if you go a minute, you can't do that. And
Yeah.
when I worked in news, I heard the same thing, right? Like, oh, it can't be a 2 minute story. It's got to be a minute 45. And you're like, I don't know like how many people are dropping off, because our feeling was always like, if it's a great story, people are going to stick around for it. Um, and what I've always seen is people could kind of fudge the analytics. They can kind of push them around to make the reality that they want to kind of see. And this is especially true when we're like my wife actually works with kind of board of directors and that kind of stuff, and like kind of storytelling, understanding their pains and how technology can innovate on behalf of them.
Mm.
And I think that the key when you're dealing with some folks, that sometimes it is just a key decision maker, and it could be a key decision maker that you're presenting to a PowerPoint and a video plays at the very start of a meeting. And you're not reaching a large audience and a wide audience on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, but it's a very, very focused audience that has your attention. And that's kind of the thing that it's not always like the highest view counts that like sometimes like I'm like, wow. Sometimes I'm like, if I have that key decision maker's like attention, and I know that they're watching it, they're absorbing it, that kind of stuff, that can almost be more valuable. And it's not always clear, and it's definitely not measurable, but if you resonate, it could be that that email that whoever that key decision maker, the other company emails your boss or a leader or something that's written on Twitter. It's it's so much voodoo for brand awareness, and just like you can never put your finger on like this is the thing. But
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the full funnel. Like you have to have all these touch points. You can't save the ranch on a single asset or single video. Especially early in my career, like I was like always hoping like this doc is going to be the doc that really hits and it's going to resonate.
Mm.
And you'd have some ups, and then you get corrected and you get downs right away. And it's that consistent beat of having a lot of stories, knowing your voice, for a long period of time, and be able to plan it. And I think for your career it's important, but also for a brand, it's like that consistent story is much more important.
Yeah. And we know that brand storytelling and just building a brand is a long-term play, right? It's
Yeah.
not, hey, this kind of happens overnight. And if you sort of evolve too much in too short of a time frame, then it confuses your audience, right? It's like, who are you, right? So that's why I think like audience is so important, because yes, you can have, let's say, a million people watch your video, or even say that they click like on your video, right? But if that's not the right audience, then you've missed the mark in a way, right? But if your true audience is really engaged in your documentary or your brand video, and they're the ones that are going to watch it through, right? And those are the people that matter. And that, sometimes, like you mentioned, is it's hard to really measure um those kind of very specific touch points. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I guess to wrap things up, Michael, what advice would you give other creative leaders, trying to really tell these really authentic, rooted stories, right, in the content that they're creating, and focus on that long-term brand building, leading with people rather than product? What advice would you give them to do that?
It's picking points that are like, these are the things I'm being really sticky about. These are where I want to kind of push all my energy, I think, is the number one thing. Um, with brand storytelling, especially at the point we're at, where it's a recently launched brand, where the brand is going to be a year from now, I don't know, because I think our audience is going to tell us, right? We're going to
Mm,
try new storytelling techniques. I think this is true. When you're testing social on Instagram or TikTok, you generally have a gut of, this is what's going to resonate with our audience. But the audience is always going to tell you it's this or it's that, or that it's a different audience. Um, so what I would say for folks that are looking for those brand moments is that, figure out, like, this is the thing that's really, really important. I would say Countdown was my baby for a long time. It took a lot of trust building. It took a lot of understanding how I can sharpen the storytelling to resonate, just not with our customers, but also something that, my colleagues and leadership can be like, this makes sense. But it's not dying on every hill. It's figuring out a way to go forward. And a lot of times, an answer of no is just more options on your table. Being like, I could go in this direction or this direction, because you're always going to have something that you're like, this is the story, whether it's a video or it's a brand element, or you're like, it's so important that this is the linchpin. And then that linchpin gets pulled, and you discover, like, hey, it's, the building's still standing. It's just not the same of what I expected. Um, and a lot of it is out of your hands, because the brand is such a big idea, that's built for a long period of time, and we're kind of just stewards. And so ideally we start influencing it, and it could be our personal taste, but a lot of it is just how our customers evolve it, how leadership business decisions will evolve it. And so it's like, just because the current shifting, it's figuring out a new way to swim with those waters. I always especially on our team, I got to figure out a better way of saying this, but I always say, like, we're the turtles or the tortoises, like, but more like the Finding Nemo, like crushed turtle, kind of cruising through the waves. You want to be a hard shell. You want to have a positive attitude and always swim in the right direction, because a lot of it is just the current taking you. You're going to kind of get knocked off, but you jump back in and keep on going. I feel like half my analogies are from Pixar movies, but I think that it's really relevant, because those are people that, like, really hammered out creative ideas, really threw away some ideas that they loved. They killed their darlings and made these really, really special things. And I think a lot of their creative challenges are in that storytelling. So, like, yeah, it's knowing that things are going to get knocked out, things you love are going to get knocked out, but you just keep on moving forward is the most important thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, they say creativity without constraints is a bit of chaos, right?
Yeah.
So,
How many directors it's like you get unlimited budget and then that's when they're kind of the storytelling falls apart. But
exactly.
yeah.
Well, we'll end there. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time. It was great having you on the show.
Appreciate your time as well. Thank you so much.
If this episode sparked something, curiosity, a new way of thinking, or something you're going to take back to the team, we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Make sure you're subscribed, leave us a rating, and drop us a comment. Tell us what stuck and what you want us to explore next. We want to know.
This is The Audience Connection, sponsored by Casual, the video partner for global brands trying to build trust with their audiences. We'll see you next time.